Hey, it's Marlene. So you think you know what family is all about? Well, let me tell you something. They laughed at me for keeping a secret, but in the end, I built an empire behind their backs, and guess what? Now, they're the ones shocked. It's crazy how they turned on me. The lies, the manipulation. You won't believe what happened next. Tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought you could trust? Or maybe you've been forced to make tough choices that no one else understood? Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And have you ever had to take control in a situation like this? I really want to know. The family was still in shock. Marlene could feel their eyes on her, the disbelief palpable in the air. They hadn't yet fully processed what had just been revealed, but they knew something had changed. Something big. The secret she had kept hidden for so long had been exposed. Her empire was no longer a whisper between her and the few who knew. It was now out in the open for all to see, and there was no turning back. Marlene stood at the head of the room, her hands poised by her sides as she surveyed the stunned expressions. Rachel was the first to speak, her voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this to us?" she spat. "You've taken everything from us. You've betrayed us all." The words stung, but Marlene didn't flinch. She had expected this, expected the anger, expected the betrayal. What she hadn't expected was the guilt that gnawed at her gut as Rachel's eyes burned with accusation. She hadn't wanted to hurt her family. She had hoped they would understand one day, but now all she saw was their fury. Derek stood beside Rachel, his face hardening. "You've taken control of everything. How do you justify that?" he asked. His voice was filled with disbelief, but beneath it was something else, something darker. Was it fear or resentment? It didn't matter. Marlene knew what was at stake now. She had worked for years to build this empire, and there was no going back. "I did what needed to be done," Marlene replied, her tone steady. "The businesses were failing. The choices you all made were reckless. Someone had to step in." She let the words hang in the air, and for a moment, the room fell silent. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but Marlene held up her hand. "I saved you. You may not like how it happened, but it's done. You're welcome." The family stared at her, their eyes wide with shock, but Marlene could see the cracks beginning to form in their facades. They hadn't realized it until now, but they were nothing without her. They had failed, and she had stepped in to make sure they didn't fall completely. Marlene felt a flicker of satisfaction. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment they finally saw her for what she was, not the weak, overlooked woman they had dismissed, but a force to be reckoned with. She had built this empire from nothing. She had persevered when they had laughed at her, and now she was in control. But the satisfaction was fleeting. Guilt gnawed at her, as it always did when she thought about what she had sacrificed to get here. The years of quiet labor, the family moments she had missed, the love she had lost. She had built this empire, yes, but at what cost? "Don't think this is over," Derek said, his voice low and dangerous. "You may have control now, but the rest of us aren't just going to sit by and let you keep it." Marlene's heart skipped a beat. The fear she had expected was here. Derek was right. This wasn't over. The family wouldn't accept their new reality easily, and there would be consequences. But she wasn't afraid. She had fought too long to let anything stand in her way now. She had built this empire, and she wasn't about to let it crumble. "Do what you must," Marlene said, her voice cold. "But remember, I'm the one who saved this family from ruin, and I'm the one who will keep it alive." The tension in the room thickened as the family members exchanged uncertain glances. They were starting to realize that this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about power. Marlene had taken it from them, and now they had to decide whether they were going to fight to take it back. But Marlene knew something they didn't. Power wasn't something you could take back once it was gone, and she was never giving it up. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving her family behind to deal with the mess she had made. The weight of what she had done hung heavily on her shoulders, but the satisfaction of her victory filled her every step. As she walked away, she knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally in control. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, But she had built this empire for a reason. She wasn't about to lose it now. The tension in the room was palpable. The family had gathered once again in the spacious living room of Marlene's estate, the same place where, just days before, she had revealed her empire. Now, the atmosphere had shifted. It was thick with resentment and disbelief. Rachel stood across from Marlene, her jaw clenched, eyes narrowing into icy daggers. I could feel the weight of her glare, cold and accusing. She was furious, and I couldn't blame her. What I had done was a slap in the face to everything she had known. For years, Rachel had been the family's golden child, the one everyone praised, the one everyone thought would inherit the throne. But now, I had built a kingdom of my own, and I was standing at the top. I saw the bitterness swirling in her eyes, and I knew the confrontation was inevitable. "How could you do this?" Rachel's voice was sharp, like a blade drawn from a sheath. Her hands were trembling slightly, though her posture remained defiant. "Betray us all just to play the hero, to build your empire behind our backs, taking control of everything our family built. You're nothing but a fraud, Marlene." I didn't flinch. The words stung, of course, but they were nothing I hadn't expected. She couldn't comprehend why I had done what I did. She was angry, no, furious, but it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt her. It was the fact that I had taken the power she thought was hers. "I didn't betray anyone, Rachel," I replied calmly, my voice steady. "I saved this family from ruin. You all were too busy squabbling over petty things, and I stepped in to make sure there was something left to fight for." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Rachel recoiled as if I had slapped her. Her disbelief was evident, and I could see the jealousy simmering just below the surface. For the first time, she was no longer the center of attention. The golden child had been overshadowed by the black sheep who was now firmly in control. Rachel's resentment festered. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she realized what had happened. She had lost, and in her mind, I had stolen her birthright. The thought of it made her blood boil, and I could almost hear her thinking, "I won't let this go. I won't back down." I watched as she stormed out of the room, her frustration palpable. She didn't have the strength to argue with me in that moment, but I knew it wouldn't be long before she would rally others to her cause. Later that night, I could feel the ripples of tension still vibrating through the house. I knew Rachel was already scheming, reaching out to family members, trying to gather support for her rebellion. She couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that everything she thought was hers was now mine. But I wasn't worried. I had anticipated her moves even before she made them. I'd always known that Rachel's sense of entitlement would be her undoing. She had never had the patience to understand what it took to truly build something, to sacrifice. I did, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to keep what I had earned. I met with my trusted allies the following day, people who had stood by me quietly, helping me along the way. They didn't need to say much. The loyalty in their eyes spoke volumes. We discussed strategies, securing our hold, making sure Rachel's whispers wouldn't turn into anything more dangerous. But even with all the plans in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel's desperation was growing. She was dangerous now, and her thirst for power would only lead to more problems for all of us. Rachel was not one to stay quiet for long. I knew she would strike back, and when she did, it would be calculated and ruthless. But that was just fine with me. I had the upper hand for now, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Rachel's desperation only made her more unpredictable. She was no longer the poised golden child who had always been at the center of everything. Now, she was a storm, and I was the one standing in her path. If she wanted a battle, then I would give it to her. As the days passed, I could feel the walls closing in on me. Rachel was rallying the family behind her, and though they were uncertain, I could see the doubt in their eyes. Some were already questioning their loyalty to me. The ones who had stood by me were fewer now, but their loyalty was unshaken. I had always known that power was a delicate thing, and maintaining it would be my greatest challenge. But for now, I was still in control. I had to be. But I knew something Rachel didn't. In the game of power, patience was key. I had spent years biding my time, and now I was ready to face whatever she threw at me. I had fought for this. and no matter how hard she tried to take it back, I wouldn't let her have it. I sat back in my chair, watching the storm gather on the horizon. The battle for control had only just begun. The next move would be Rachel's, but I was prepared. And when the time came, I would make sure she knew exactly why I was the one who had won. Derek's hands shook as he flipped through the papers, the weight of each document sinking deeper into his chest. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Marlene, his sister, had quietly taken control of all his companies, not just a few shares, but the entirety of his business empire. The papers were damning, outlining the meticulous legal maneuvers that had left him powerless. His mind raced. How had this happened? How had she done this without him noticing? The anger rose within him, burning hot. Betrayal coursed through his veins. He had trusted Marlene. She had always been the quiet one, the overlooked one, and now she was pulling the strings behind his back. His breath came in short bursts, his hands clenching into fists as he sat back in his office chair. "No," he muttered to himself. "No, this can't be happening." It wasn't just about the money. It was the principle of it all. His pride, his position. Marlene had taken everything from him without a single word. He couldn't let her get away with it. He couldn't let her win. Determined, Derek stormed out of his office, making his way across the estate toward Marlene's study. His footsteps echoed loudly in the hallway, each one a reminder of his frustration. When he finally reached her door, he didn't knock. He just pushed it open, and there she was, sitting calmly at her desk, as if she knew this moment was inevitable. Marlene looked up slowly, her face unreadable. "Derek," she said with a faint smile, "I was expecting you." "How could you do this to me?" Derek's voice trembled with rage. His chest tightened with every word. "How could you betray me like this? You knew what this meant to me, and you took it all. You took everything." Marlene didn't flinch. She didn't show a hint of emotion. She simply sat back, crossing her arms. "It was inevitable," she said in a calm tone, her voice cool and collected. "I did what needed to be done." Her words hit him like a slap. He tried to hold on to his composure, but inside his frustration reached a boiling point. You manipulated me, Marlene. You were always the shadow, always in the background, and now you're the one in charge, and I'm nothing." Marlene's gaze never wavered. "You're wrong, Derek. You weren't paying attention. You were too busy believing you had everything under control. I just made sure this family survived. I didn't steal anything. I saved it." The words stung, but they weren't just words. They were truths wrapped in a calculated calmness that Derek couldn't ignore. His hands clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms. He couldn't let her win, not like this. "I won't let you get away with this," Derek growled, his jaw tight. "I'll take back what's mine." Marlene gave him a thin smile. "Go ahead, try, but you'll find that the board is already on my side. You're too late, Derek." The next few days were a blur of meetings and attempts to regain control. Derek called for a board meeting, demanding that his position as head of the companies be reinstated. But when the meeting took place, Marlene's presence was calm, assured. She'd anticipated his every move. "You thought you could outsmart me, didn't you?" she said, her smile knowing, almost smug. "I've always been one step ahead." Derek's heart pounded in his chest as Marlene calmly laid out the legal documents, proof of her control. She had planned for every contingency. There was no escape, no loophole to exploit. Derek's attempt to regain control fell apart before it even began. The board members nodded in agreement with Marlene, and Derek was left standing, humiliated. His failure burned inside him. How could he have been so blind? He had been outplayed, outmaneuvered, and now he was left with nothing. Anger boiled over, but it was mixed with something darker. Self-doubt. The anger he felt towards Marlene was nothing compared to the fury he directed at himself. The walls of his office seemed to close in on him as he paced back and forth, hands clenched tightly at his sides. He had failed. But more than that, he had underestimated Marlene. She had outsmarted him at every turn, and now he had to decide. Was he going to accept his defeat, or was he going to fight back? His thoughts raced. He couldn't just let her win. He had to fight. But how? The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. Derek didn't trust his emotions anymore. They had only made him vulnerable. He needed a new strategy, one that was quieter, more calculated. He began reaching out to key members of the family, slowly building alliances, pulling at the strings Marlene had woven. He wouldn't win with brute force. He would win by exploiting the cracks in her empire. "If I can't win on my own, I'll make sure she falls from her throne," Derek muttered to himself in the silence of his office, his voice low and cold. It was the beginning of something darker, a plan that would take time, patience, and careful manipulation. Derek knew the battle was far from over, but this time he would be the one who controlled the pace. The boardroom door slammed shut behind him as he walked out, and for the first time in days, a sense of clarity washed over him. His pride was wounded, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He was going to fight Marlene with everything he had, and he would win, even if it meant playing a much more dangerous game. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as I sat at my desk, the weight of the day pressing down on me. Today was going to be hard, too hard. I had known it would come to this, but that didn't make it any easier. Elaine was coming. I could feel the tension building even before she arrived. My mind kept replaying the conversation we were about to have, but nothing could truly prepare me for it. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. "I never wanted this," I whispered under my breath, my voice barely audible. But I knew deep down there was no turning back. I couldn't go back to the way things were, not now, not after everything I had sacrificed. Elaine was coming, and I had to face her. This wasn't just about business, this was about family. And today, I was going to have to confront the woman who had given me life, the woman who had taught me so many things, but who, like all mothers, could not understand why I had to take control. A soft knock on the door broke my thoughts. I took a deep breath and straightened up. "Come in." Elaine stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking with mine. The silence between us was heavy, thick with unspoken words. She crossed the room slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. The door clicked shut behind her, and we stood there face to face, the weight of everything that had happened sitting between us like an invisible wall. "Do you really think you're doing the right thing?" Elaine's voice was sharp, her anger barely contained. "You've torn this family apart, Marlene. You've taken everything from us. How could you do this?" I remained calm, my posture unwavering. "I'm not tearing anything apart, Elaine. I'm making us stronger." Her face twisted with disbelief. "Stronger? By destroying everything we've worked for? By taking control of the companies? By undermining the legacy Dad built? You've betrayed us all." Her words hit harder than I expected, and for a brief moment, I felt the sting of them. But I quickly pushed the emotion aside. I had to be strong. "I didn't betray anyone," I replied, my voice cool and controlled. "I did what needed to be done. The family was falling apart, and no one was stepping up to fix it. You all refused to see the truth." Elaine's anger flared, her hands trembling as she clenched them into fists. "I'm not blind, Marlene. We built this family together. I sacrificed everything for this family." Her voice cracked as the emotion bubbled to the surface. "And you've come in and destroyed everything." The words cut deeper than she probably realized. I had always felt like the outsider in this family, the one who never quite fit in, who was always overlooked. But now, I had proven my worth. I had built something from nothing. I wasn't just the quiet, underestimated daughter anymore. I was the one in charge. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice hardening. "I saved us. You may not see it now, but in the end, you'll understand." Elaine's face softened for a brief moment, her fury giving way to confusion. She sat down heavily in the chair opposite me, her shoulders sagging. "Maybe I've been blind," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "Maybe all of this, maybe I was wrong." The doubt in her voice, the vulnerability, caught me off guard. For the first time in our conversation, I saw it, the crack in her armor. It was there, just beneath the surface, and it made me pause. "You don't have to feel this way, Elaine," I said, my voice gentler now. "I didn't want to hurt you, but things have changed. We can't go back to how things were. I've worked too hard to get here." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "I don't know if I can support you in this anymore," she said, her voice shaking. You've crossed a line, Marlene. I can't be a part of this. I can't be a part of you anymore. The words hit me like a slap. Then leave, I said, my voice cold, harder than I intended. I can't afford to look back now. Elaine's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything else. She simply turned and walked out of the room, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. I sat there for a long time, the weight of her departure pressing down on me. It was over. She was gone. But I couldn't let myself dwell on it. I couldn't afford to be weak. This was the price I had to pay for my power. Family had always been the foundation, but now, that foundation was crumbling. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the estate. The view was the same, but everything felt different now. I had won the battle, but at what cost? I've made my choice, I whispered to myself. There's no turning back now. The chapter ended with a quiet sense of resolve. I knew the next battle was just beginning, and I would fight until the end. But for now, I was alone, standing tall, knowing that the future was mine to shape. The cold, sterile light of the conference room flickered overhead as I stood by the large oak table, looking out the window. The distant hum of traffic barely reached me, lost beneath the weight of what was about to happen. I knew the family was coming, and with them, the storm. I had prepared for it, but no amount of preparation could shield me from the emotional intensity of what I was about to face. I glanced at the door, knowing they would be here soon. Each of them, carrying their own fears, suspicions, and anger, would be walking into this room expecting answers. They wouldn't like what I had to say. I wouldn't blame them. This will be the turning point. No going back now, I muttered under my breath, the words slipping out as a quiet reminder to myself. There would be no room for compromise today. No more hiding in the shadows. I was done being the family's quiet observer. I wasn't looking for approval anymore. I had to face this. I had made my choice. My destiny was now my own, and I was determined to solidify my place at the top, no matter the cost. The door creaked open, and one by one, the family members filed in. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, the weight of their gazes making the space feel smaller. Derek, Rachel, even Elaine, none of them spoke as they took their seats, their expressions a mix of disbelief and fury. I looked at each one of them, feeling the tension like a crackling wire stretched taut. I took my seat at the head of the table. I know this is hard for all of you, I began, my voice steady, though my insides were taut with the knowledge of what was coming. But this is how it has to be. Rachel was the first to speak, her voice shaking with anger. What have you done, Marlene? She spat. You've taken everything we built. You think you can just take control of everything? I kept my expression impassive. No, I've saved everything. You just couldn't see it. The room erupted. Derek, red-faced, slammed his hand on the table. You've destroyed us. This is treason. The accusations flew fast, but I didn't flinch. The more they shouted, the calmer I became. This was the moment I had been preparing for. Their anger was a necessary part of the process, just a symptom of the shock they would eventually accept. I didn't destroy anything, I said again, my tone cold and firm. I did what had to be done. The family was falling apart, and none of you were willing to fix it. Fix it! You've broken it! Derek's voice was full of rage. You've taken everything from us, from me. I let them vent. Their disbelief was palpable, their confusion and anger mixing into a toxic brew of emotions. But I was resolute. I had already won. The conversation shifted as Elaine, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but her disappointment was clear. Marlene, you've crossed a line. You've destroyed everything your father worked for, everything we built. Her words stung more than I'd like to admit, but I couldn't afford to show weakness. I did what had to be done. You'll understand one day. Elaine's eyes filled with tears, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered. I could feel the weight of her gaze, the disbelief in her eyes. I wasn't just taking control of a business empire. I was tearing apart the very fabric of our family. And yet, despite the guilt that gnawed at me, I couldn't stop. She looked at me, her face a mix of anger and sadness. Maybe I've been blind, she muttered, more to herself than to me. Maybe all of this, maybe I was wrong. Her admission was the crack I'd been hoping for. I could see the seeds of doubt taking root in her, but I had to keep going. I couldn't stop now. You weren't wrong to want to keep everything together, I said quietly. But what you've always wanted is dying. The world isn't what it used to be. The only way forward is change. Elaine's voice trembled, and I could see how torn she was. I can't support this, she said, her eyes breaking from mine. I just can't. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had to push forward. If you can't accept it, I said softly, then leave. But I'm not going to stand in the way of progress. Her face twisted in pain, and she stood up, shaking her head. I can't be a part of this anymore, she said, her voice low and full of hurt. I won't. You've gone too far. As she walked out, I felt a pang in my chest, but I pushed it aside. I had made my choice. This was how it had to be. I stood alone in the conference room after everyone had left, my thoughts swirling. I looked out the window, the view now foreign, distant. I had fought so hard to get here, and yet it felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. It's done, I whispered to myself. But at what cost? The silence that followed was deafening, but it was the silence of victory, quiet, cold, and complete. I stood in front of the conference room door, feeling the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. The cold, sterile room seemed to match the tension in the air. Every step I took toward that door felt like a step closer to a battle I had prepared for but could not fully predict. I wasn't going to back down. No matter what happened today, I was done asking for permission. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. This is my empire, I muttered under my breath, the words a quiet declaration to myself. And I won't let anyone take it from me. I knew Derek and my mother would not go down easily. Their power, their anger, it was all too much for them to lose. But this was the moment. This was where I solidified my place. When I entered the room, Derek was already waiting. His eyes were sharp with fury. The tension between us was palpable. I could feel the weight of his resentment hanging in the air like a thick fog. Let's get this over with, he spat, his voice filled with anger. I met his gaze unflinching. We will, but it's your choice whether you want to come out of this with dignity, Derek. You've taken everything from me, he said, his voice low, simmering with rage. I will not back down from this fight. I gave him a calm, measured look. You had your chance, I replied. Now it's mine. The silence that followed was thick, the tension almost suffocating. Derek's fists clenched, but there was nothing he could do to change the facts. The empire was mine now. He had failed, and I had succeeded. I'm not done yet, Derek growled, but his words held less power with each passing second. He knew the game was over. I watched him closely as he fumed, but I felt nothing but a quiet satisfaction. The storm in the room swirled, but I had already weathered it. Now it was just about making sure they all knew who was in charge. Later, I found myself face to face with my mother. She stood across from me, her disappointment seeping through her like poison. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, now felt cold and accusing. I never thought you'd be capable of this, Marlene, she said quietly. You've betrayed everything we've worked for. I met her eyes, refusing to look away. I didn't betray anything. I've saved it. I saved us. You just couldn't see it. Her gaze faltered for just a moment. You've ruined everything. All these years. All I did was try to protect you. I stepped closer, my voice softer than it had been with Derek. I didn't want this, Mom, but I can't be a prisoner to your expectations anymore. If you can't accept this, then we're done. The words stung as they left my mouth, but they were necessary. It was my turn now, and no one was going to stand in my way. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the person who's going to lead this family forward, whether you accept it or not. The room fell silent. My heart hurt as I watched her retreat, but there was no room for weakness anymore. No time for second guessing. I had a future to build. I left the confrontation with my mother behind, stepping into my office and closing the door behind me. The weight of everything, the loss, the tension, the battle, settled over me. I was alone now, with only my thoughts and my empire. I stood at the window, gazing out at the city below. The future stretched before me, uncertain, but mine to shape. I had fought for this, sacrificed everything for this moment, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. No one will take this from me, I whispered to myself. I've fought too hard. The road ahead would not be easy, but I was ready. This was my empire now, and no one would stand in my way. The tension at the family estate was suffocating. The once grand walls of the house, which had witnessed years of family unity, now seemed to hold nothing but conflict. Each corner of the room, each glance from a family member, felt like another silent accusation. My victory was still fresh, but the battle was far from over. I sat alone for a moment, gathering my strength. Derek's renewed attacks on my empire had only just begun. I could feel his fury building, and I knew he would come at me harder than before. But I had no illusions. They could fight all they wanted, but the empire was mine. I wouldn't give it up. They can fight all they want, but the empire is mine, I whispered to myself, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. I won't give it up. The realization sank in. This wasn't just a fight for control anymore. It was a fight for everything I'd worked for, and I was prepared to win at any cost. Derek, on the other hand, was not done. He had spent days huddled with his allies, looking for any way to destabilize the empire I had built. He believed he had found a loophole, something that would allow him to snatch everything back. But his plan was destined for failure. I watched from the sidelines, detached but always aware of his every move. Derek's desperation to outsmart me only reminded me of how much power I held over him. He would fail, just like the others before him. "You think you've won?" Derek had hissed the night before. "You haven't seen anything yet." I gave him a cool, composed smile. "You're always one step behind. You should have known that by now." He had stormed off, his attempts collapsing around him, just as I had known they would. And though his failure fueled his anger, it also strengthened my resolve. I had already won this round, but the battle with Derek wasn't the only war on the horizon. At dinner that evening, the entire family gathered around the table, and it felt like a battlefield. The food, once a symbol of togetherness, now lay untouched as accusations and anger filled the air. My own family, the people I had known my whole life, were turning on me. "You've become ruthless, Marlene," one of my cousins accused. "Selfish, cold. Everything you've done, it's for you," my aunt added, her voice shaking with frustration. "You've taken everything from us." I stared at them, each word slicing into me. But I didn't flinch. They thought they knew me, but they didn't understand what it took to get here. They thought I was destroying the family, but I wasn't. I was saving it. They think they can break me, I thought, my mind cold and steady. But they'll never succeed. Not while I'm in control. Their resistance was growing, stronger and more vocal with each passing day. Some were even plotting against me in ways I hadn't anticipated. But I wasn't worried. I had already anticipated their every move, just like Derek's failed plan. And just like the others, they would learn that they were no match for me. The conversation continued, but I wasn't really listening anymore. All I could think about was the future, the road ahead, and how I would navigate it. I had sacrificed too much to let them take it from me now. The moment I was alone in my office again, I stared out the window at the sprawling city beneath me. I had built this empire from nothing, and I wasn't about to let anyone destroy it. I had given everything for this, and there was no going back now. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, but I wouldn't be backing down. "This is it," I whispered to myself, standing tall. No turning back. I made the decision then. I would no longer play defensively. I was going to take control, no more waiting for them to make their move. It was my turn to dictate the terms. The next morning, I walked into the conference room, my steps firm and sure. The family was already gathered, waiting. They knew this moment would come, and now it was here. This ends now, I said, my voice calm but carrying authority. Either you're with me or against me. I felt the weight of my words settle in the room, every eye on me. The tension was thick, but I was ready. This time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I had already made my choice, and they would either accept it or be left behind. The room was dimly lit by the last rays of sunlight streaming through the window, casting long shadows across the polished floor. I sat at my desk, my fingers lightly tracing the edges of the papers in front of me. Everything was finally in place. Every strategy, every move I had planned was ready to unfold. There was no going back. I knew this would be the hardest decision of my life, but it was the only one left. For years I had fought to get here, and now I was going to do whatever it took to keep it all. The empire, my empire, was mine. I fought for this, I murmured to myself, the weight of the words sinking in. I won't let anyone take it away now. Not anymore. As the tension in the air grew heavier, so did my resolve. The family, once a united front, had become a battleground. And no matter the cost, I would hold on to the power I had fought so hard to claim. My thoughts turned to Rachel. She was the last of them, the last person standing between me and total control. Our rivalry had lasted years, each move, each word a calculated strike. But this time, I would finish it. The confrontation with Rachel had been inevitable, and now it was time. I stood up from my desk, my heart pounding in my chest, not from fear, but from the cold certainty of what needed to be done. I found Rachel waiting for me in the private room. The space between us felt charged, the years of rivalry hanging heavy in the air. Her gaze met mine, defiant but resigned. She knew she had lost. The question was whether she would accept it. "You've won," she said, her voice tight. "But I won't forget how you did it." I looked at her, the sister I had once trusted, the sister who had tried to tear down everything I had built. "I didn't ask you to forget. I asked you to accept it." There was a long silence, and I could see the anger in her eyes. But there was something else too. A shift. Her defiance had faded into something darker, something more accepting. She nodded, though it was clear that the truce between us would be a fragile one. "I'll give you a chance," I said, though my tone was cold. "But don't think for a second that I'll forget what you've done." Rachel turned away without saying another word. I watched her leave the room, knowing that this battle had ended, but not in the way I had hoped. The war, however, was far from over. The family was a mess now. The dinner table, once a place of laughter and conversation, had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. As I stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the family I had fought for, I realized that the cost of victory had been far greater than I ever expected. Trust, loyalty, and love had all been sacrificed. In the aftermath of Rachel's defeat, the family had fractured even further. Some were too afraid to challenge me, while others, like Derek, whispered of rebellion in the shadows. But I stood firm, my eyes set on the horizon. I had won, but the price was steep. The family was lost, and I was left standing alone. I had no one to share this victory with, no one to lean on. The emptiness settled deep within me. I was victorious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious had been irreparably damaged. I stood at the balcony of my mansion, the skyline sprawling before me. I had built this empire with my own hands, but now, as I looked out at it, it felt like a prison. "I've sacrificed everything for this empire," I said to myself, my voice barely a whisper. I won, but I'm not sure it was worth it. I had achieved everything I wanted: power, control, success. But at what cost? The family I had once been a part of was gone, scattered in the wake of my ambition, and there was no one left to share it with. The victory felt hollow. I had everything, but I was alone. Sitting back in my office, the weight of the empire pressing down on me, I realized the price of power. The empire was mine, but the cost was more than I could bear. The loneliness, the betrayal, the broken relationships, everything I had built had come at a price I wasn't sure I could pay. But there was no turning back now. The family was lost, and my path was set. "I've built this empire," I whispered to myself, the words heavy with finality. "It's mine, but I'll carry the weight of it alone." I sat at my desk, the dim glow of the evening sun stretching across the room like a fading memory. The weight of my decisions pressed down on me, heavier than any burden I had ever known. I had fought tooth and nail to get here, to make this empire mine. But as I looked at the papers in front of me, the victory felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I had won, yet there was an emptiness that I couldn't ignore. Rachel had finally accepted the situation, but a part of me still wondered if it was genuine or simply a survival tactic. The family was fractured, and the price I had paid to achieve this power was more than I had ever anticipated. I've built this empire, but what have I really won? I whispered to myself, the silence around me answering back with a resounding void. My empire was in my grasp, but the cost of it had eroded the things I once valued. The weight of the crown I had fought so hard for was now nothing but a constant reminder of the loneliness that had accompanied my rise to power. Later, I gathered the family for the final meeting. The room felt cold, as if the walls themselves knew what had happened to us. The once unified force was now a broken shell, each person sitting there, unsure whether to fight or accept their fate. "You've had your chances," I said, my voice steady. "But now it's my turn. You can either stand with me or be left behind." There was no challenge, no resistance. The room remained silent, save for the subtle shifting of chairs. Some were resigned, while others wore their resentment like a badge of honor. But the truth was, they knew it was over. The fight had drained them, and in the end, they would have to accept my rule, however unwillingly. Rachel's change of heart was evident. She no longer argued, but instead offered her hand in partnership. For a moment, I could see vulnerability in her eyes. The sister who had once been my fiercest rival now stood before me, asking for redemption. "I was wrong, Marlene," she said softly. "I see that now. I can't fight you anymore. Let's move forward, together." I stared at her, the years of bitterness and distrust clouding my judgment. "You've hurt me too many times for me to trust you now, but I'll give you a chance." There was a heavy pause before Rachel nodded, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her defeat. I knew that whatever truce we shared, it would never be the same. Trust, once broken, could never fully be mended. As I sat alone later, staring out over the city from my office, the world seemed so small. The empire was mine, yet it felt hollow. I had everything: power, wealth, control, but it meant nothing without the people who had once been by my side. "This empire is mine," I thought, a bitter smile curling on my lips. "But what good is it if I have no one left to share it with?" The cost had been high. The loneliness gnawed at me. I had achieved everything I set out to do, but the void it left behind was something I couldn't escape. I had won, but I had lost so much along the way. There was no turning back now. This was my life, and I would carry the weight of it alone. As I reflect on everything that has happened, one thing stands clear: success comes at a cost. The price for power, for control, for ambition, it's often heavier than we imagine. We spend our lives chasing after things, only to realize that we may have lost what truly matters along the way. The choices we make shape us, but they can also isolate us. So I ask you, how much are you willing to sacrifice for your dreams? And is the victory worth the loneliness that can come with it? We all face moments when we must choose our path, but we shouldn't forget to ask ourselves what really makes us happy. Success is not always about winning. Sometimes it's about finding balance, about making connections that last, not just the ones that push us forward. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. Are you chasing your dreams, or are you missing out on something more important? Drop a 1 if this video touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't like it, I'd love to hear why. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories that might just make you think differently. Stay tuned for what's next, and remember, sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Thanks for watching.